Every country you've ever lived in has rules nobody wrote down. Rules about how friendly you're supposed to act, how much you're supposed to explain yourself, how hard you're supposed to chase attention, how guilty you're supposed to feel for saying no, how much drama you're supposed to enjoy just to feel like your life is interesting. You didn't choose these rules. You absorbed them from your parents, your school, the shows you grew up watching, the comment sections you've scrolled through at 2 a.m. And once a rule is absorbed early enough, it stops feeling like a rule at all. It just feels like how the world works. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most of these rules don't actually make your life better. They just make you easier to predict. In the Nordic countries, a strange thing happened over the last century. People quietly stopped following 10, actually 11, of the rules that most of the rest of the world still treats as unspoken law. Not because they're smarter, not because they're colder, not because life is somehow perfect there, but because, over generations, they ran the experiment and decided some of these rules simply weren't worth the wait. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which rules you're allowed to quietly drop too. Some of them will feel obvious once you hear them. One of them, buried in the middle, will probably make you uncomfortable, in a good way.
Let's start with the rule almost nobody admits they're guilty of.
Rule 1. You have to prove you're right. Somewhere along the way, you learned that winning an argument matters more than ending it. It makes sense why. If you're right and you back down, it can feel like the other person got away with something, like your frustration didn't count, like backing down makes you weak and staying firm makes you strong. But watch what actually happens when two people both refuse to be wrong. The conflict stops being about the actual problem. It becomes about who has to lose. The original issue gets buried under something much heavier, pride. In the Nordic mindset, this is treated less like strength and more like a kind of self-indulgence. Being technically correct while making someone feel small isn't admired. It's seen as someone who can't handle disagreement without turning it into theater. There's a small island shared between two Nordic countries where, decades ago, a lighthouse ended up built on the wrong side of an old border. It could have become a genuine diplomatic fight, one country insisting ownership because they built it, the other insisting because it sat on their land. Instead, both sides simply agreed to redraw the border around the lighthouse, gave equal land back in return, and left fishing rights untouched. Nobody won a dramatic victory. Nobody had to be embarrassed. The line on the map just got a little strange, so the relationship didn't have to.
That's the rule they ignore. Being right is not the same as being wise. Sometimes the smartest move isn't proving your point until nothing is left. It's finding the version of the outcome that lets everyone keep their dignity and their weak. Rule 2. You have to seem warm all the time. Nobody says this rule out loud, but you feel it constantly. Answer every message with enthusiasm. Smile bigger than you feel. Turn every small interaction into something warm and bright, or risk being read as cold, distant, unfriendly. It's exhausting, especially on the days you're not sad. You're just neutral, just tired, just a normal human having an unremarkable Tuesday, expected to perform delight anyway. Nordic culture largely rejects the idea that warmth has to be loud to be real. Care doesn't have to look like enthusiasm. Sometimes it looks like not disturbing someone. Sometimes it looks like saying exactly what you mean, instead of dressing it up to sound nicer than it is. This gets misread by outsiders as coldness constantly. It isn't coldness. It's warmth without the performance layer. And once you notice how much energy goes into faking excitement you don't feel, you start to resent how normal that performance has become everywhere else. Rule 3. A promise is just a nice thing to say. This is the rule that changes how you deal with people for good. In a lot of places, yes is soft. Someone says they'll help you move, and everyone quietly expects a cancellation text an hour before. Someone says, let's catch up soon, and both people already know it's closer to a goodbye than an actual plan. Words get cheap, and once words are cheap, trust has to be replaced with something heavier. Contracts, reminders, following up 3 separate times just to make sure something you were told will actually happen. In the Nordic countries, the default runs the opposite direction. If you say yes, you mean yes. This shows up somewhere surprisingly literal. Thousands of free wilderness cabins scattered through forests, unlocked, unstaffed, uncontrolled by cameras or company maintenance. You arrive, you use the firewood, and you're expected to restock it before you leave. so the next stranger doesn't arrive to an empty hut in the middle of nowhere. Nobody checks. Nobody has to. The whole system only works because people treat their word as binding, even when nobody is watching. Freedom like that stays free only as long as people don't treat it carelessly. That's the rule worth stealing. Stop treating your yes as a suggestion you might walk back later. Say no clearly without a guilty explanation attached, so that your yes finally starts meaning something again.
Rule 4. You have to make sure people notice you. This one feels modern because it is. Post it or it didn't happen. Get credit or it doesn't count. If nobody saw you do the good thing, did the good thing even matter? Attention isn't evil. It opens doors, builds opportunity. Nobody's pretending otherwise. But there's a specific trap hiding inside it, when your entire sense of worth depends on whether someone else clapped for it first. In Nordic culture, trying too hard to be noticed is one of the fastest ways to make people quietly uncomfortable around you. Competence earns more respect than volume. Being the person others trust matters more than being the person others talk about at dinner. The freeing part of this rule is simple and worth repeating slowly. You're allowed to do something well and let that be the whole reward. Nobody is coming to revoke the achievement just because you didn't announce it to anyone. Rule 5. Being ordinary is a failure. Somewhere, normal quietly became an insult. Success is supposed to lift you out of ordinary life entirely. Different house, different friend group, different rules that seem to apply to everyone except you now. Finland has a rule that punishes that entire mindset without exception. Speeding fines are tied to income. A wealthy businessman there was once fined the equivalent of well over $100,000 for driving 30 kilometers over the limit, because a flat $50 ticket means nothing to someone worth millions, and the entire point of a consequence disappears if it doesn't actually cost the person anything. The message underneath the number: money buys comfort, not exemption from consequences. Status isn't supposed to lift you above the rules everyone else lives by. Staying grounded after you succeed isn't a consolation prize handed to people who couldn't rise further. It's the actual goal the whole way up. Rule 6. Setting a boundary is rude. You've felt this one before. Saying no requires an excuse good enough to survive scrutiny. I'm tired isn't enough on its own. You need a reason solid enough that the other person won't quietly take it personally. And even armed with a good excuse, there's still guilt sitting underneath it. Like wanting a little space somehow makes you difficult to deal with. Nordic culture treats privacy as entirely normal, not as a red flag worth investigating.
Needing quiet doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. If someone says no, the respectful move is simply accepting it, not digging for the real reason, not pushing until they cave and explain themselves anyway. This is part of why Nordic friendships can survive long stretches of silence without any real damage. Two people can go months without talking through a genuinely busy season of life, then pick the conversation back up exactly where they left it. No explanation demanded, no resentment quietly waiting at the door when they finally reconnect.
Rule 7. Comfort should always win. Driving is easier than cycling. Ordering food in is easier than walking to get it. The elevator is easier than the stairs. And there's nothing wrong with choosing easy sometimes. Life is already full enough without turning every small decision into a discipline test. But when comfort becomes the automatic answer to everything, something quietly breaks underneath it. You lose the specific kind of effort that keeps you feeling alive, not just comfortable. In Copenhagen, cycling isn't treated as a fitness identity people perform. It's simply how people get to work, school, and the grocery store. Close to half of all daily trips in the city happen by bike, not because it's trendy, but because a small daily dose of effort got quietly built into ordinary life, instead of postponed to later at the gym if there's time. The rule they ignore isn't avoid comfort at all costs. It's don't let comfort make every single decision for you by default. Rule 8. Drama is what makes life interesting. Somewhere, conflict became entertainment. Comment sections engineered for outrage, shows built entirely around who's angry with who this week. A quiet, uneventful day starts to feel like nothing worth remembering happened at all. Nordic media offers an odd counterexample. National television channels there have run hours of unedited nature footage. Birds nesting, seals swimming in silence, absolutely nothing dramatic occurring on screen. And hundreds of thousands of people still watch it, on purpose, specifically for the calm it delivers. The rule worth breaking here isn't complicated. Your nervous system doesn't actually need conflict to feel entertained. It's simply been trained, patiently and repeatedly, to expect it. Rule 9. Extra effort is something to avoid. Modern convenience is designed around a single promise: remove every possible friction. Fewer steps, fewer decisions, fewer moments where your body has to do anything at all. Nordic simplicity quietly rejects one piece of that promise. Not effort in general, just the belief that removing all of it automatically makes life better. Walking somewhere in bad weather instead of ordering it delivered isn't treated as a hassle to eliminate. It's treated as the kind of small, physical, grounding effort that actually keeps you connected to your own body and your surroundings, instead of floating slightly outside both. The goal was never to remove every bit of friction from existence. It was always to keep the kind of friction that keeps life working for you over the long stretch, not just the next 10 minutes. Rule 10. Nature is just scenery. For a lot of the world, nature is something you visit, a backdrop for a photo, a place you escape to only once the city becomes genuinely too much to handle. In the Nordic mindset, nature isn't decoration waiting to be photographed. It isn't required to be comfortable or convenient before it's allowed to matter. The bugs, the cold, the mud underfoot, none of it is treated as a flaw ruining the experience. It's simply what being part of something larger than your own schedule actually feels like once you stop expecting it to behave. That's the real shift underneath this rule. Stop treating the outdoors as a reward you earn only after enough productivity, and start treating it as something you already quietly belong to, whether you show up or not. 11 rules, none of them secret, all of them things you were taught to follow without ever once being asked whether they actually served you. You don't have to move to Scandinavia to drop the ones that don't. You just have to notice which ones you've been carrying purely out of habit, and finally put them down where you're standing. If one of these hit closer to home than you expected, tell me exactly which one in the comments below. And if you want the next set of unspoken rules most people never think to question, the next video is waiting for you right here.